Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. The last video took a little bit more effort than I intended to record, mostly because I decided mid-video that I wanted to look up stuff, so I have some editing I need to do on that. Hopefully this one will be a little bit more straightforward and more to the point. But so I want to talk about Jane Austen July and the fictional books that I am currently reading. I'm going to start off with the non-Jane Austen related books. And the first one I want to discuss, let me just bring up something for when I get to this point. I don't know why it constantly moves to different screens. Anyway, the first one I want to discuss is, I think I'll do Lemise first. Slowly but surely making progress with Lemise. I need to start taking this with me whenever I happen to have a few spare minutes to read, because the chapters are quite short, and if I just do a chapter every time I have a little bit of time, I could make my way through this book in a decent amount of time. I mean, it's a huge book, because this is an unabridged version, but I need to just make the I need to make the commitment just to read a little bit whenever I just have a couple minutes. I did annotate a little bit in this book. I used, because I didn't want to write up in my nice copy of Lemise, I went ahead and decided to use one of the clear sticky notes for my annotation set, and this is my other one. But it, I wrote a little bit of a note about Javert's motivations and what a reason why he might feel about Valjean the way he does. And I don't think I'm going to go more into detail about that. Maybe I will once I get to the end, because I want to maybe write more notes on that, like on Javert's motivations, but also about different characters and their motivations as I feel called to write notes about them. But yeah, so I've made some progress, but I definitely have a long ways to go. But yeah, this is probably the first fiction book that, since I started annotating again, that I've done some annotation in. Now, with Terry Brooks, the annotation is going to look different. I did add a note in here, and most of it is actually a stylistic note. And the reason is, if you're not aware, first of all, this is a trilogy here, all in one. I'm reading the first book in this trilogy, which is actually called Sword of Shannara, although the trilogy is itself called Sword of Shannara. So it's a Sword of Shannara trilogy, first book, Sword of Shannara. And the Sword of Shannara is also the very first book that Terry Brooks wrote. Terry Brooks was originally a lawyer, and he was still working when he would have written Sword of Shannara. I think he stopped working between this and the Elfstones of Shannara, which was the second book in the series. Although I'm not completely sure. I know now he's a full-time author, but I can't remember exactly when it was that he decided to go full-flung into a writing career and to step out of law practice. But something that I've noticed, and I've noticed this before with Brooks, is that especially in his earliest book, he tends to tell versus show in a way that I think he would be better served by showing more. And like I said, I think a lot of this is part of it is stylistic, but part of it is due to the fact that he's a very new writer at this point. I seem to remember when I read it introduction that he wrote to one release of the Elfstones of Shannara, how much of a shock it was to him when he first sent in Elfstones, and he just kind of expected it to be accepted the way that Wish Song was, and he got it sent back and was basically told to completely rework it. And it was at that point that he learned how. Oh gosh, my hair's a mess. I had my hood on earlier, which I sometimes do when my eyes are bothering me, so my hair's all terrible. Okay. Anyway, but so it was just a bit of a shock to him that after the relative ease he had in getting Sword Shannara produced, he had a lot of editing to do to Elfstones, and it was then that he realized how much work can go into editing, or is required when you edit. You know, it's really hard to rip apart your baby, and metaphorically baby, obviously, and to make it into something that is tighter and flows in a way that a publisher would want. And it can hurt because it's like a part of yourself is being attacked. Even though it's not necessarily an attack, it's an attempt. It's constructive criticism. But the first time you hear constructive criticism for something that is a creative process, it can hurt. And the author has to learn really quickly to get a thick skin. Now, I do have a tendency. Okay, when I was in high school, I'm going to put down this book because it's heavy. When I was in high school and college, I was in a few online groups with my mom. Well, she didn't know initially that I was in the group with her because I wanted to get her a completely honest opinion on my writing style. And I didn't think that she would. I thought she would let me off easy if she knew that I was. If I let her read my writing and I asked her to give an opinion, I thought that she would let me off easy because she would be afraid of discouraging me from writing. So what I did was I joined one of her writing groups. It was a group that had a 500-word club where you'd have a picture prompt and you would write 500 words. And then people would make comments on each other's writing, etc. So I joined that under a pseudonym. She didn't know I was there. It was really funny because she would read me my own writing to me and make comments about it without knowing that I had written it because she used to read me other people's writings. So it cracked me up, and it was a really great way to get her feedback. But also, her writing mentor person, he, for some reason, thought that my mom had chosen to create a second account and write. Spilled tea on myself. Good thing it's not hot still. And for some reason, write under both of those accounts instead of just writing twice to the same prompt as herself. I guess because at that point our writing style was similar enough. But anyway, when you are part of a writing community online, especially at that time, my mom was very deeply involved, and I followed her to a couple writing groups after I let her know who I was and, got my surprise out. I followed her to a couple of the more serious writing groups where I learned to look at people's writing with a mind towards editing and serious critique. And even though I'm not that serious about writing, I still do some writing for fun, but I've never been able to unsee and unlearn that editing way of reading when I'm reading fiction. And so it's kind of ruined, not completely ruined, but it has affected the way I read fiction. So I notice things that could have been said better or could have been done better. It might not ruin the reading experience for me, but it will stand out. And so there are points when reading Terry Brooks early on where I can say, okay, well, first of all, it's obvious that he's very influenced by Tolkien early on. His, I forget what he calls them because I haven't really gotten to the point where he talks about what they're called, I don't think. But the frightening, shadowy figures are very much influenced by the ring wraiths. And you have Al-Anon, who's definitely like Gandalf. The Veilmen are definitely, hobbits. And it's not like he's straight out copying, but you could see that he's very strongly influenced by Tolkien's world. And as Terry Brooks becomes more comfortable in his own world building, you can start seeing where he starts diverging from Tolkien, that he still takes, he's still influenced by Tolkien, but not in such a way that you could almost do a one-to-one comparison. He starts becoming comfortable in his own world and in his own characters, and he develops his own style. That being said, he does make some new author mistakes that you don't see in Tolkien. He ends up repeating things about certain characters that I don't feel like he needed to repeat more than once. But there are also things like, let me see. Okay, here we go. So, this is what I need to actually put a note here, because this is one of the points where I'm not sure that Brooks read this aloud to someone. And I don't know how his editor missed this. So, he's explained to Al-Anon about this particular important aspect of the story. I don't want to give it away. But Shay nodded absently at the tall man's explanation, confused and still suspicious. Flick was looking at his brother as if he had never seen him before. "What does all this mean?" he asked Al-Anon eagerly. Now, from that, without any other context, you would think that perhaps it was Flick asking eagerly. Because remember, Shay is confused and still suspicious. But this is Shay who is asking eagerly. At least that is the way that it sounds. And it's a tonal mismatch. It's actually not even a complete tonal match for Flick, because Flick is also confused. It doesn't really the eager, I'm not sure if eagerly was quite what Brooks wanted to say, or what Brooks wanted if that is what Brooks wanted to say. I'm not sure if it works with the mood he has set before that. And I think this is just a mistake that he made more as a new writer type of thing. I actually need to make sure I put a tab here so I remember to write that note. But yeah, it was just kind of an odd. It was just odd. It didn't quite match what the tone was beforehand for the characters. So there's that, and I'm just trying to free a tab and not get two up at once, because I do that sometimes, and then I have to stick the tab back on. Okay, I think I just have one here. So I'll make sure to write that note down so I don't forget it later. Okay. So then there's different points throughout where he mentions a character called Minion Lay. And the first time that you run into him, or run into information about him, is fairly early on. The brothers get a letter from Minion, or technically Shay gets a letter from Minion, and I think it's earlier on than that. It's before he starts talking about Al-Anon. Let's see. So here it is. So it starts off where Okay, sorry about that. I found the sections I was looking for. So, this was something that I mentioned in passing earlier, but I think also showed how um, Brooks was that he was a new author and still learning the tricks of his trade when he was writing the first book in the Sword of Shannara trilogy. And the first time a character called Menyon Lay is mentioned, you are introduced to him in form of a conversation, which is actually a really good way to introduce a character in a very dynamic way, because you have two characters who really are having this conversation about this other character. Um, in this conversation, you see how Shay feels about Menyon, how Flick feels about Menyon, um, and in the course of that conversation, you learn more about Menyon, not only about how Shay and Flick each feel about Menyon, but the fact that Menyon is a son of kings, and just how the brothers in general feel about that. And also the fact that Menyon is able to live any way he chooses, so that he is a bit of a, wild, nothing really holding him in any one place at trouble, any one place at a time. That he's always in trouble. That he gets them in trouble, and all this comes out in the course of the conversation. So this is a very good way to introduce Menyon, and this is done right at the beginning. So not long after that last conversation that I bring up, where we have that really weird mismatch in tone between what the characters are said to have felt, but then the way that Brooks has the character respond eagerly instead. At this point he actually does well. He introduces a character that's not present, that we have not met yet, but he introduces him in a dynamic way, in a way that feels natural, in a conversation between these two brothers that tells a decent amount about this character. How each brother feels about him, who he is. He's a son of kings. He's able to live the way he wants. He's a troublemaker, and he gets the brothers in trouble. So, and then how each of those brothers feel about that aspect of him. So, this is a very good introduction to his character. Now, for some reason, well, not for some reason, this still kind of works. So, next time there's a conversation about Menyon, it's 10 pages later. It's actually literally 10 pages later. So, Menyon comes up again. And again, we have Flick expressing how he feels about Menyon. And then you have Shay expressing his opinion. And then why Menyon needs to be made to be involved. This does work in context. So this is, again, okay, you are bringing up the same things again that were brought up in the introduction of Menyon 10 pages ago, but it works in context. There's a reason why this is coming up again. This sounds like this is an issue that Flick harps upon every time he hears Menyon's name. He always is going to say his opinion. Shay always kind of thinks it's funny that Flick has this reaction. But, I mean, in this case, he doesn't think it's funny in the second section because it's dealing with something else. But it works because it does seem to follow up. You're creating a pattern for Flick as well. Yes, it's reiterating information about Menyon, but it's making clear that this is something that Flick's not willing to let go. This is a character, without telling us, this is a way of showing that Flick, once he makes an opinion about someone, is not inclined to let that opinion go unless it's really made apparent to him that he held a wrong opinion or that person changed. So this actually works. Now, the third part, where we finally are we're getting very close to actually meeting Menyon. And this is probably about 6 pages later. For some reason, upon entering Menyon's kingdom, Brooks feels like he needs to explain the relationship between the brothers and Menyon all over again, but instead of doing it in the very dynamic and natural way that he did previously, where it takes place in the course of conversation, and it tells something about all the characters involved, the ones involved in the conversation and the one being spoken about. But it's a very good way of handling it. For some reason, in this third point where Menyon is brought up, it's not a conversation. It's Shay in his head. Not even like he's sitting there actively thinking. It's in the narration in Shay's head. And for some reason, you have a section where it says the Valemen are maneuvering through the crowds, and Shay found himself reflecting on his improbable friendship with Menyon Lay. And then Brooks rehashes the same information in a much less interesting way. And I don't know why he chooses to do this, and I don't know why the editor didn't have him trim the fat, because this added nothing new to the conversation. It was something that had been told better earlier on, and honestly not that earlier on. It's, it was, less than, that was 24 pages ago where we are first introduced to Menyon. I'm pretty sure the way that Brooks introduced Menyon, you weren't going to forget him in such a way that you needed to run through all the information all over again in a narrative way when you're going to actually meet Menyon in less than a page. So it just felt like a very odd narrative choice. It felt like it was just unnecessary. And I'm interested in seeing, because I can't remember, I'm interested in seeing how, by the time we reach Elfstones of Shannara, if this writing style gets tightened up. Because I do remember Elfstones is probably my favorite of his books, with very close on its heels being the one after that, which is the Wish Song of Shannara. So I have a feeling he probably tightened up his writing style, but I'm interested in seeing, as I'm reading this and writing notes on stickies, because I don't feel like marking up my copy of this, I'm interested in seeing an improvement in his writing style, because he's definitely making what I would consider some rookie mistakes. Even though obviously he's published and I'm not. But that being said, that doesn't mean that I can't pick up where something would be better done, or when something is unnecessarily repetitive. So yeah, it's unfortunate that he felt like he needed to give the same information in this last section when he did so well to begin with. It just, it's frustrating because you showed me you can do this. I know you can do this because you did this to start, but why? So, yeah, if I had been, involved in his editing team, I probably would have had, you had the point where the brothers enter Lay, and I do understand that I tend to be a bit more minimalistic in regards to background. I don't care about what the place looks like. I care about characters and their mindset. So I understand that in a fantasy, there could be, for world building's sake, some need to create an idea of the landscape around, because that can in fact be a character in and of itself. And world building is important when you have a completely different, when you're in a fantasy world, you aren't dealing with this world. So I get it. But after you describe Lay, when they enter in there, I do understand that maybe that would not have worked in conversation, that this is something that needs to be covered in narration. I can see that. But after you enter Lay, I think you can skip the section where Shay just sort of opines about Menyon in his head in the most, unnecessary way. Especially since then you flip over to Minion's point of view, and we haven't even met Minion yet. So it's that sort of omnipotent point of view. I think that they could have stopped the okay, we've entered Lay. We have their view of Lay. And then you reach the Lay and sister home, and Minion walks out. Start right there. Now let Minion introduce himself. Let us see Minion through Minion's own actions, through his own interactions with the brothers. There doesn't need to be this huge internal dialogue about Minion that we've already seen in real dialogue better. So, yeah. So that's Sword of Shannara. I was going to do this particular video covering all the fictional things that I've done, but I think I'm going to stop this video because I went so much into Sword of Shannara in this one, far more than I intended, that I'm going to stop this video, save it, and then I'll do the next one on Jane Austen July and on the Star Trek book that I wrote. So I will be back. Thank you if you made it through this rant, and I will see you next time. God bless. Bye.